I'm sensing that there's been a step change in the music around Brexit with this latest government. First of all, when the youth mobility scheme was discussed, we had the government, Keir Starmer, being very negative about this. But this week there's been a change in that the EU ambassador has been over here talking to Times Radio, and I will play you that clip in a while. Pedro Serrano has been here giving some wonderful messages to Britain around the youth mobility scheme, which may be changed to make allowances for the difficulties that Britain is facing and the EU is facing with migration. But it's a fairly long interview, and he really does give some fantastic responses to what is a fairly hostile interview, in my view. But then this morning we got news that from the conference that the Minister for Trade, Douglas Alexander, spoke at the conference and was very disparaging about the Pacific trade policy of the previous Brexit Tory governments. And that really gives me hope, because what we need is to ensure a step-by-step approach back to the EU. And one of those really important steps is to get rid of this unicorn trade policy, in believing that there's some way or advantage of being of trading with the Pacific separately and having a separate deal with the EU, because those two realities always mean that we're going to have trade barriers because of the difference in standards. The only way for us to thrive as a country is to accept that Brexit was a bad idea. It was actually a flawed and rigged vote. It was advisory, the same as Unite's vote on the winter fuel allowance last week. And it was full of corruption, as we know. The courts have heard that. The government's own lawyers admitted in the courts that the vote was corrupted. And it only survived because it was advisory and the courts couldn't vitiate it. So it really is time for us to bite the bullet and accept that Brexit is and always was deeply flawed and would never deliver what it promised. And perhaps we're now finally seeing the beginnings of this. And, once we have admitted that we don't want to continue with the lunacy of the Pacific trade madness, then we can align to EU regulations, we can get a veterinary agreement, we can then build on getting back into and as close to the European Union as possible. And from a security point of view, with Vladimir Putin, Ukraine, and the threat of Donald Trump coming into office, this is urgent. And so I'm really hearted to bring this news to you today.
Yeah, this is about ensuring that our youth continues to get together to know each other. There's a big need, I understand from what I hear and read, of language learning in the UK. And definitely if we have a mechanism that allows young British citizens to go, for a gap year, for example, they have a choice of 27 states within the European Union to do a bit of learning and pay for their learning while they're there. Why not? So I think that's how we have to look at it. That's what's really behind this.
It's a couple of years now since the Brexit referendum. People's views may have shifted and changed. People may have got a slightly different take on how it went. What is your perception of the UK? What's your kind of feeling about the UK now?
Well, the UK is an amazing country. And it's been spearheading economic and scientific and all kinds of developments in Europe and supporting certainly the 20th century. Previous centuries are more complicated. We could have different kind of judgment, but definitely the 20th century It's been supporting democracy in Europe and has been fighting dictatorships. So I think Europe owes a lot to the UK in terms of what it is today. And what is important is to ensure that we have a UK that continues contributing to a healthy and strong Europe as it has done in the 20th century. And I think that's hopefully where we're heading.
You get the sense that might change in a positive direction under Keir Starmer?
I think we have a government that has announced that they want a stronger relationship with the EU, and I think that is positive for Europe.
In that, given that Keir Starmer, I mean, he says the most important thing for him is to stop criminal gangs. You know, he wants to share more information.
Sure.
He wants to tackle those gangs at source. He's saying very similar things to what you're saying. So it sounds like you're pretty much in the same place.
Well, I think we all see the phenomenon and the threat that it represents, the challenge that it represents in the similar way. And that's why I think the cooperation will be relatively straightforward.
Pedro Serrano, it's lovely to have you with us. Thank you for being with us. I want to start by talking about, we have a new Prime Minister and he's proposing a reset. What does that mean to you?
Well, many thanks for having me. A reset means looking at the relationship again, how we can improve it and strengthen it. And we are very keen to strengthen the relationship. We live at times that are full of threats and challenges, and it's an important European country. The European Union is at the heart of prosperity, security and democracy in Europe. And definitely working together, we'll be able to succeed in facing those challenges much more effectively.
Do you think we needed a reset?
You know, I wouldn't. Reset is one way of calling things. I think we need a strengthened relationship and a strong relationship. I think a strong UK is good for the EU, and UK would be stronger if it has a stronger relationship with the EU. And I do think that a strong EU is good for the UK.
Do you think that enough time has passed now since Brexit for maybe some of that tension in this country, actually, and probably beyond it, to have kind of faded a little bit, that maybe people are ready to talk about the EU in a different way and the UK's relationship?
I think you're better placed than I am to judge on what the UK citizens think and believe. I do think that the international circumstances have brought urgency to all of us to get our act together and be able to face these challenges more effectively. The terrible Russian attack on Ukraine, I think, is focusing minds, and therefore I think we have to be ready in any case to have a stronger relationship and to face those challenges effectively.
And have you had much interaction from the new Prime Minister? Have you met Keir Starmer yet?
I've met him on a couple of occasions before he was elected Prime Minister, indeed.
And have they been in touch much with you?
I'm in touch with many members of his cabinet, of ministers, indeed, and yes.
Because he's made a couple of trips, hasn't he, Keir Starmer, to meet the French and the Germans, and sort of made a big moment of it, if you like.
Absolutely. He has travelled to Germany, to France, to Italy now, most recently. And he's reaching out to European states, and I think he's making clear that he wants this new relationship with the European Union, yes.
And from your perspective, what would that new relationship look like? Because in this country, a lot of the focus is often on the youth mobility scheme, and people hear about that and they kind of go, no, we don't want to do that, absolutely not. And in fact, Keir Starmer has said no to that. Do you think that was the right move? Was he right to just shut the door on it?
I haven't heard Keir Starmer say no, but nevertheless, I know that it raises questions and concerns, and some people mix it up with migration-related issues or mobility-related issues, whereas it has nothing to do with any of that. This is about ensuring that our youth continues to get together to know each other. There's a big need, I understand from what I hear and read, of language learning in the UK. And definitely if we have a mechanism that allows young British citizens to go, I don't know, for a gap year, for example, to they have a choice of 27 states within the European Union to do a bit of learning and pay for their learning while they're there, why not? So I think that's how we have to look at it. That's what's really behind. People this. Want them to stay later for work. It's a totally different process. This will be limited in time. It's done ad hominem, meaning person by person, and I think it's a scheme that will just help our societies to remain closely linked to each other as they should be.
Can you understand why people why the reaction to it from some people in this country is to say no, because they feel like it's opening the door to free movement of people, which is what a lot of people didn't like about being a member of the European Union.
Well, I think there's a misunderstanding. And I think, free movement depends how you look at it, because very often what I do get is many people saying, can't we travel and can we go into Europe through different lines as well and make
in the passport queue.
Yes, in the passport queue. So what I get in reality is people that would like to move more easily towards Europe and not to make that more difficult. That's a bit what I get. Then, yes, there is the fear of migration. It's a big topic, not only in this country, in Europe as well. Mm-hmm. And we have to see how we're going to be facing that, working together more effectively. But it has nothing to do with the youth mobility scheme. It's something very different, and it's good that people understand it, and probably they will accept it. I think all those that are parents and have kids and university age or students or young people that just want a bit of adventure, they will understand this quite well.
Why do you think people get caught up with it in their minds then? Why do you think people are hesitant about it?
I don't know. I think maybe also media should be informing a bit more accurately about it, and I think that would help.
I think there's a bit of scaremongering going on. More broadly, I mean, you mentioned immigration. It's a big question.
Yes.
for all European countries. Is there scope, do you think, for a deal between the European Union and the UK? Because there are some nations that really fear that the UK is acting as a pull factor here, that there are a lot of people who cross Europe who want to come to the UK.
Well, a lot of people want to go to Germany, to France, to Spain, to Italy. I mean, there are many people that want to go to many places. And actually, one of the things that we have done in the European Union recently is agree on a migration pact, which will lead to a much stricter control of anyone that crosses borders and that asks for asylum. There's a solidarity clause included in that migration pact, which is important to manage migration flows, to support the countries that are frontliners in terms of receiving irregular migrants. And I think the fact that when we start implementing this migration pact, it will have a knock-on positive effect also on people coming to the UK. So migration is a very complex phenomenon. Yeah. Migration per se is not bad. It's, let's say, irregular migration, which is not only bad in terms of disrupting normal working arrangement, but also because of all the criminality that is involved in it, and the danger and risks that are taken and that are to which irregular migrants may be subject to. They end up being victims of terrible gangs. And I think we are very keen to work even more closely together with the UK in addressing those factors.
So you think a formal deal could be something that might work in that case?
Formal deal. What I say is that we can have a stronger cooperation. We have to look at this in a very holistic perspective. There are countries of origin that we have to engage with, countries of transit that we have to engage with. There are police aspects that need to be looked at. So it has to be looked at in a very holistic way. And I think it'd be great to have a good dialogue with the UK on these issues.
Would it be acceptable for the UK to strike individual deals with countries like France and Germany on immigration, on migration?
It's up to France, Germany and the UK to decide what's best for them.
But the EU would be something that European Union would be happy with generally?
The European Union is happy for member states to do whatever they think is in their interest if it respects their obligations within the European Union. And so anything that can be done in a useful way, I think no one is going to object. But the problem is it goes beyond the borders of France to Germany and the UK. And an overall more holistic EU approach will probably be, in our case, in any case, we cannot handle migration just in France and Germany. It has to be handled as an EU, and it will maybe more profitable to look at it from that perspective.
How about returns agreements? What do you think the role of returns agreements could be?
That's the returns agreement. That's an issue that has to be considered by each country that wants to enter into a returns agreement. We are pursuing returns agreement with a number of non-EU countries in order to ensure that persons that do come from these countries can be safely returned to their country and establish other means of ensuring that but trying to prevent that criminal gangs take advantage of them. So they can be a deterrent. They're an important deterrent, and they can help also combat the criminal gangs.
So having the UK involved in that, given that Keir Starmer, I mean, he says the most important thing for him is to stop criminal gangs. You know, he wants to share more information.
Sure.
He wants to tackle those gangs at source. He's saying very similar things to what you're saying. So it sounds like you're pretty much in the same place.
Well, I think we all see the phenomenon and the threat that it represents, the challenge that it represents in the similar way. And that's why I think the cooperation will be relatively straightforward.
What about what Italy's doing with Albania?
Italy has an agreement with Albania, but all the Albanians that are being, all the irregular migrants that are being processed in Albania, those that are entitled to international protection, will be returned to Italy in order to receive refugee status. So it's a very specific agreement.
But more of those agreements might be workable?
I don't know. I don't know if anyone is pursuing it, but Italy is pursuing it, and yes, it's.
How do you view the issue of migration more generally? I mean, you're differentiating between irregular or illegal migration and migration. How do you see that problem being fixed more generally? How do you manage the flows of people? Because Germany's obviously come out recently and taken quite a strong line on it. It feels like there is a bit of a fracturing going on within the European Union at the moment. I mean, the UK is very much on one side of that, but what
you don't fix migration. Migration is a reality, and it's a reality of mankind. So we are a species that has been moving during centuries, trying to find better possibilities for making a living. So that's in our nature, and it's very natural. Of course, we need to have a more, let's say, structured migration in order not to disrupt economic and labor and social cycles in different states, and that's what we try to do. Many states, the United States was a country largely created by migrants. So I think we have, there's a tendency to see migration in negative terms, whereas it's something natural for humanity, and what we have to have it is, let's say, controlled in a structured manner that benefits all countries, that can be easily maintained by the country that is receiving and is not creating problems in that country, and can be a benefit to those that are traveling from other countries. But it is, I think it's one of the problems that we have is that we see it always in a very negative light, whereas we have demographic problems in Europe. We're losing population. And if we want to keep our standards, well, we'll need people to come from other countries to help us. And I think that's what we have. If we have a deal on migration, also to look at those aspects and how we can have a regulated migration.
With caps, maybe, numbers, that kind of thing.
For example.
Yeah. I want to turn to security. I know that a big part of your own professional background is in defence and security, and you mentioned it right at the very start of our conversation about how that's brought countries actually closer together. How do you see the European Union's role in Ukraine's future?
Well, the European Union has offered and is offering all the support it can to Ukraine from the outset. It has offered now membership. Ukraine applied for membership, and the European Union agreed to.
Could that go faster? Could you speed that process up?
There's no interest in speeding processes if there are no parallel changes and adaptations and reforms in the countries that are joining the European Union, because they have to be ready to join in a way that will be constructive for them and for the European Union itself as well. And so there's no interest in terms of accelerating the processes moving forward. Ukraine, despite its very difficult situation, is making very important advances, and we will continue supporting it so that that accession becomes a reality. And of course, we're supporting Ukraine in many other ways: diplomatically, militarily, training. Delivering weapons and arms systems to Ukraine.
The Prime Minister is in New York, the UN General Assembly. Ukraine is obviously presenting its plan to the UN General Assembly. Part of that is about Storm Shadow missiles and their use inside Russian territory. Is that something that the EU is supportive of, that you would like to see those weapons used more broadly, and that would be acceptable?
Well, I think the High Representative has been public in supporting this line, but then the EU, its member states, there's no common position amongst member states on this.
Should there be, do you think? Do you think it would be helpful for Ukraine if there was a common position?
I'm really not dealing with the situation right now. I cannot cast a judgment. I think it's a very important issue, and it's been discussed at the highest levels.
How much of a fear do you think people in Europe more broadly feel about Russia? What's the sense of where Russia is and how much of a threat Russia is?
The problem is not Russia, it's the Russian government and President Putin. And I think we always have to make that distinction. But definitely right now it is representing a major threat, not only to Europe and European security and stability, but actually to worldwide stability and security. That's why Ukraine has received clear support from the UN General Assembly, and not because countries wanted to support European positions necessarily, but because they felt equally threatened by the violation of territorial integrity and sovereignty that represents the attack by Russia on Ukraine. It's an imperialistic attack, and this should not happen in our days.
I want to ask you finally, just if we can take a step back. It's a couple of years now since the Brexit referendum. People's views may have shifted and changed. People may have got a slightly different take on how it went. What is your perception of the UK? What's your kind of feeling about the UK now?
Well, the UK is an amazing country. And it's been spearheading economic and scientific and all kinds of developments in Europe and supporting certainly the 20th century. Previous centuries are more complicated. We could have different kind of judgment, but definitely in the 20th century, it's been supporting democracy in Europe and has been fighting dictatorships. So I think Europe owes a lot to the UK in terms of what it is today. And what is important is to ensure that we have a UK that continues contributing to a healthy and strong Europe as it has done in the 20th century. And I think that's hopefully where we're heading.
You get the sense that might change in a positive direction under Keir Starmer?
I think we have a government that has announced that they want a stronger relationship with the EU, and I think that is positive for Europe.
Thanks for watching. Do comment below. If you haven't subscribed, then do subscribe.